October 14th, 1943. The sky over Nazi Germany became a graveyard. In just 6 brutal hours, German fighters tore through American bomber formations like wolves through sheep. 60 B-17 flying fortresses, massive 4-engine bombers, each carrying 10 young American airmen, were blown apart, ripped to shreds by cannon fire, and sent spiraling to earth in flames. 600 Americans died or were captured in a single afternoon. The United States 8th Air Force lost 20% of its attacking force in one catastrophic mission. Military historians would forever call it Black Thursday, the day the American daylight bombing campaign nearly died. The German Luftwaffe believed they'd cracked the code. Meet the B-17s beyond fighter escort range. Attack head-on at combined closing speeds of 500 miles per hour. Watch the supposedly invincible flying fortresses explode like fireworks. The formula worked with brutal efficiency. German high command ran the numbers after Black Thursday and reached a stunning conclusion. At this attrition rate, the American bomber force would be completely destroyed within 8 weeks. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, declared confidently to his fighter pilots, "The Americans cannot sustain these losses. Their precious daylight bombing offensive is finished. We have won the air war." German intelligence calculated that no air force on Earth could replace bombers and trained crews fast enough to survive 20% losses per mission. The mathematics of attrition guaranteed German victory. The Americans would either quit daylight bombing or be annihilated trying. But the Luftwaffe made one catastrophic miscalculation. They never anticipated what was coming in December 1943, a sleek, silver fighter that would hunt them across the entire breadth of the Third Reich, turn their safe zones into death traps, and transform the hunters into the hunted overnight. How did one aircraft reverse the entire air war over Europe in just 6 months? By autumn 1943, the German Luftwaffe had transformed bomber destruction into a lethal science. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, chief of the German fighter arm, commanded over 800-day fighters stationed across Western Europe, battle-hardened veterans redeployed from the brutal Eastern Front, many boasting over 50 confirmed aerial victories. These weren't green recruits. They were expert killers who'd survived the merciless skies over Russia. The Luftwaffe had engineered devastating tactics specifically designed to annihilate B-17 flying fortresses. German intelligence had meticulously studied American bombers and identified their critical vulnerability, the nose. German fighters flying Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s would assemble in formation beyond the range of American escort fighters, which could barely reach the German border before fuel forced them home, then attack head-on in coordinated waves. At combined closing speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour, American nose gunners had less than 2 seconds to track, aim, and fire. Meanwhile, German 20mm and 30mm cannon could tear through a B-17's nose structure like paper, killing both pilots instantly and sending the massive bomber into an uncontrollable death spiral. The Luftwaffe organized specialized Sturmgruppen, storm groups, heavily armed and armored Focke-Wulf 190s specifically tasked with bomber destruction regardless of cost. These assault units would absorb defensive machine gun fire close to point-blank range within 300 feet and unleash devastating cannon salvos. One accurate burst could literally saw a flying fortress in half. The combat statistics validated German methods with brutal clarity. The August 17th Schweinfurt-Regensburg double mission cost 60 American bombers, an unsustainable 16% loss rate that shocked 8th Air Force commanders. October's Black Thursday proved even more catastrophic, 20%. Losses in a single afternoon. Within just 2 months, the 8th Air Force hemorrhaged over 150 heavy bombers and 1,500 trained aircrew, Men who required months to replace. Intercepted Luftwaffe radio communications from October 1943 reveal supreme tactical confidence. One German fighter commander transmitted, "The Americans are brave but strategically foolish. They fly toward us in predictable formations, in broad daylight, far beyond their fighter protection. They make our mission remarkably easy." Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring personally assured Adolf Hitler that the American bomber offensive would collapse under the crushing weight of its own losses within weeks. German fighter pilots mockingly called the unescorted B-17 formations Thanksgiving turkeys, targets so defenseless that even novice pilots could score confirmed kills. Why such overwhelming German confidence? Because cold, mathematical reality supported every assessment. At 20% attrition rates per mission, no air force on Earth could sustain operations. The Luftwaffe had calculated correctly. Without long-range fighter protection, American daylight strategic bombing was mathematically doomed to failure. By November 1943, American air commanders confronted a brutal mathematical nightmare. At current attrition rates, the 8th Air Force was being systematically destroyed faster than replacement aircraft and trained crews could arrive from the United States. The survival statistics were horrifying. Bomber crewmen faced only a 25% chance, 1 in 4, of surviving their required 25 mission combat tour. After Black Thursday, crew morale collapsed completely. Men calculated their odds before each mission briefing, and the mathematics were absolutely terrifying. Some bomber groups lost 200% of their original assigned strength, meaning every single crew position was filled twice over with replacement personnel after casualties. Young men watched friends die mission after mission, knowing they were statistically next. The British, who had abandoned costly daylight bombing after devastating 1940 losses, were openly saying, "We told you so." Royal Air Force Bomber Command Chief Air Marshal Arthur Harris bluntly informed American commanders, "You cannot bomb in daylight without prohibitive losses." We learned this lesson in blood during 1940 and 1941. Now you're learning it too. Switch to night operations before you lose everything. The fundamental tactical problem was fighter range. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, America's frontline escort fighter, could only penetrate approximately 400 miles before fuel limitations forced it to turn back toward England. That left bombers completely naked and defenseless for over 400 miles of hostile German airspace. Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s would simply wait patiently until the P-47 Thunderbolts turned for home, then pounce on the unprotected bomber formations with devastating effect. Internal 8th Air Force planning documents from November 1943 reveal the crisis clearly. One strategic planning memorandum stated bluntly, "Unless the fighter escort range problem is solved immediately, continuation of daylight strategic bombing operations is operationally and strategically untenable." General Ira Eaker faced career-ending pressure from Washington. The entire American strategic air doctrine, precision daylight bombing to destroy specific industrial targets, was failing catastrophically. Some Army Air Forces planners advocated switching to British-style night area bombing. Others suggested suspending all strategic bombing operations entirely until 1944. The bomber crews themselves, traumatized by watching friends incinerated mission after mission, openly questioned whether their enormous sacrifices served any strategic purpose whatsoever. One B-17 pilot's diary from November 1943 recorded, "We're just feeding good men to German guns. There must be another way." While the Luftwaffe celebrated Black Thursday's carnage, a revolution in American fighter design had already been underway for 18 months, a development that would fundamentally transform the air war over Europe and reverse German dominance completely. The P-51 Mustang's origin story exemplifies American innovation at its absolute finest. Originally designed for the British Royal Air Force in 1940 by North American Aviation in just 120 days, an astonishing engineering achievement, the early Mustang was aerodynamically superb but critically underpowered with its Allison engine. Then British engineers achieved a breakthrough. Mate the Mustang's exceptional low-drag airframe with the powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The result was extraordinary beyond all expectations. The P-51B variant, operational by December 1943, achieved what military planners had considered impossible: sufficient range to escort heavy bombers to any target deep inside Germany while simultaneously maintaining combat performance superior to German fighters. The technical specifications were absolutely revolutionary. Maximum range with external drop tanks, 850 miles one way, sufficient for Berlin escort missions requiring 1,600 miles round trip. Top speed, 440 miles per hour at altitude, faster than both Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s. Service ceiling, 41,900 feet, operating above German fighter effective ceiling. Armament, 650 caliber Browning machine guns with 1,880 rounds total ammunition, devastating firepower with excellent reliability. But raw performance numbers reveal only half the story. The P-51 could escort bombers to Berlin and return 1,600 miles round trip, while German fighters barely managed 400-mile radius. The Luftwaffe's supposedly safe zone beyond American escort range was about to vanish permanently. American strategic planning evolved dramatically beyond mere defensive escort. In January 1944, newly appointed 8th Air Force Commander General James Doolittle issued revolutionary tactical orders: pursue and destroy the German Air Force wherever found, in the air and on the ground. No longer would American fighters remain rigidly attached to bomber formations. P-51 Mustangs would hunt aggressively, actively seeking combat rather than passively avoiding it. The industrial advantage proved overwhelming. American factories produced P-51 Mustangs at astounding rates, over 15,000 by war's end. By March 1944, the 8th Air Force fielded 13 complete P-51 fighter groups. Every combat loss could be replaced within weeks. German experienced pilot losses, by devastating contrast, were strategically irreplaceable. P-51 pilot training emphasized offensive aggression. Unlike previous defensive escort doctrine, pilots learned offensive combat tactics, exploit superior speed, and diving acceleration to bounce German fighters during their vulnerable climb to bomber altitude. Transform the German standard climb profile, their established tactical doctrine, into a fatal death sentence. Top American fighter aces eagerly transferred to P-51 units. These weren't merely escort pilots, they were trained hunter-killers. Captain Don Gentile, who achieved 21.83 confirmed aerial victories, perfectly described the P-51's revolutionary impact. We went from protecting bombers to hunting fighters. The Germans went from hunters to hunted overnight. December 1943 through February 1944 marked the Quiet Revolution. While B-17 flying fortresses continued suffering terrible losses, new silver-skinned fighters with distinctive squared-off wingtips began appearing in American formations. Luftwaffe pilots initially dismissed them, just another short-range escort that would inevitably turn back at the German border. They were catastrophically wrong. The first P-51 Mustang groups began combat operations in December 1943, but initial missions deliberately kept them close to the English Channel. This was calculated deception. American commanders wanted the Luftwaffe to underestimate the P-51's revolutionary true capability. Let German intelligence believe it was merely another P-47 Thunderbolt or P-38 Lightning with similar range limitations. Captured German intelligence reports from January 1944 prove this deception worked perfectly. One Luftwaffe tactical analysis confidently concluded, the new American fighter appears to be a P-47 variant with similar range limitations. No significant tactical changes required. German fighter controllers continued directing their forces to attack beyond the 400-mile mark, where they confidently expected American fighters to be completely absent. Then came March 3, 1944. Over 730 heavy bombers launched for targets across Germany, including the first American bomber raid against Berlin itself. More than 800 fighters escorted them, including over 170 P-51 Mustangs tasked with penetration escort all the way to Berlin and back. Weather conditions were absolutely miserable: thick clouds, dangerous icing, and visibility under 1 mile. Many bombers aborted and turned back toward England, but the P-51 Mustangs pressed forward, their pilots navigating by compass and dead reckoning through the heavy overcast. German fighter controllers tracked the massive American formations approaching steadily from the west. Following standard procedure, they waited patiently for the escorts to turn back. Standard tactical doctrine. Let them reach the 400-mile mark, then scramble everything against the naked bombers. But the American escorts didn't turn back. They kept coming. At 500 miles deep, at 600 miles penetration, German controllers, monitoring radio traffic in complete disbelief, began issuing increasingly frantic warnings. Achtung! American fighters over Brunswick, enemy escorts past Magdeburg, and finally, the absolutely unthinkable, American fighters approaching Berlin. Luftwaffe squadron commanders simply couldn't believe the reports. Berlin was 600 miles from England. No fighter on Earth possessed that operational range. The controllers must be mistaken. But radar confirmations kept flooding in. The impossible was actually happening. One American P-51 pilot later described monitoring German radio traffic, complete chaos. They kept desperately asking their controllers to confirm our position. They absolutely couldn't believe we were there. The March 4th Berlin mission changed everything. In a single day, the myth of the Luftwaffe's untouchable safe zone evaporated completely. As German fighters climbed desperately to intercept the bomber stream, they encountered something absolutely unprecedented: aggressive American fighters diving from superior altitude, actively seeking combat rather than avoiding it. The first Messerschmitt 109s never even reached the bombers. P-51 Mustangs bounced them during their vulnerable climb phase, using superior speed and devastating energy tactics to slash through German formations before they could organize. Lieutenant Colonel James Howard of the 354th Fighter Group, flying alone after becoming separated from his unit, single-handedly engaged over 30 German fighters attacking a bomber formation near Brunswick. For 30 relentless minutes, he dove, climbed, and maneuvered with extraordinary skill, disrupting attack after attack. He destroyed at least 4 enemy fighters confirmed, and potentially 6 total, whilst the bomber formation escaped completely unscathed. Howard received the Medal of Honor for this action, becoming the only fighter pilot in the European theater to earn America's highest decoration. But Howard's individual heroism represented something far larger: P-51 Mustang tactical superiority. The technical advantages weren't marginal, they were absolutely overwhelming. Speed: P-51 P-51 at 440 miles per hour versus Focke-Wulf 190A at 408, Messerschmitt 109G at 428. Dive acceleration. P-51 Superior could disengage at will from any engagement. High-altitude performance. P-51 dominated above 25,000 feet, where B-17s operated. Turning combat. P-51 could outturn Focke-Wulf 190s, match Messerschmitt 109 low-altitude maneuverability. German pilots found themselves trapped in an impossible tactical position. Climbing to bomber altitude, they were vulnerable to diving P-51s. Engaging P-51s meant abandoning the bomber attack, exactly what American escort doctrine intended. Running wasn't an option. P-51 Mustangs were faster. The tactical situation that had favored German fighters for 2 years had reversed completely overnight. The combat statistics tell the devastating story. From March through May 1944, the kill ratio swung dramatically in American favor. February 1944, before P-51 dominance, 8th Air Force loses 246 heavy bombers. March 1944, P-51s to Berlin. 8th Air Force loses 156 bombers, a 38% reduction. April 1944, 129 bombers lost. May 1944, 118 bombers lost. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe losses skyrocketed catastrophically. March 1944, German day fighter losses exceeded 280 aircraft. April, over 340. May, nearly 400. The Luftwaffe was hemorrhaging irreplaceable experienced pilots faster than training programs could possibly replace them. Captain Don Gentile of the 4th Fighter Group became the face of American fighter dominance, shooting down 21.83 enemy aircraft. On April 8, 1944, Gentile destroyed 3 Messerschmitt 109s in a single mission, demonstrating the absolute lethality of an experienced P-51 pilot against German fighters. German ace Lieutenant Heinz Nock, who survived the war with 33 victories, recorded in his diary the psychological impact. April 11, 1944, American Mustangs everywhere. Our losses are catastrophic. The new American fighters are superior in every respect. We can no longer protect our homeland. Even more devastating, P-51s began escorting bombers to target, then breaking off to strafe Luftwaffe airfields during return flights. German fighters weren't safe anywhere, not at altitude, not on the ground. By June 1944, D-Day, the Luftwaffe's fighter arm was in catastrophic freefall collapse. The same force that had shot down 60 American bombers in a single day just 8 months earlier could barely mount effective resistance. The pilot loss statistics were absolutely devastating. During the 4 months from March through June 1944, the Luftwaffe lost over 1,000 day fighter pilots killed, captured, or wounded from a frontline strength of roughly 2,300 pilots. Worse, these weren't inexperienced novices, they were battle-hardened combat veterans. The pilots who understood how to bounce bomber formations, who mastered energy management and tactical formation flying, were dead or captured. Replacement pilots arrived with appallingly inadequate training. In 1942, German fighter pilots received over 240 hours of flight training before reaching operational units. By mid-1944, that had collapsed catastrophically to just 110 hours, barely enough to master takeoffs and landings, much less combat tactics. Some replacement pilots reached frontline units with fewer than 20 hours flying their assigned aircraft type. Interrogation reports from captured Luftwaffe pilots reveal complete psychological collapse. 1 Messerschmitt 109 09 pilot shot down during May 1944 stated, "We are told to attack the bombers, but the Mustangs attack us first. If we climb, they dive on us. If we dive away, they follow and catch us. There is no escape. It is like hunting mice." Another captured pilot from June 1944, "Our experienced men are gone. We have boys flying who barely know how to fly, much less fight. When we see the Mustangs, we just try to survive." Tactical directives from Luftwaffe High Command showed demoralization, reaching even command level. A May 12, 1944 order explicitly instructed, "Fighter units will avoid combat with American escort fighters when outnumbered or at altitude disadvantage. Preservation of force takes priority over bomber interception." This was a stunning admission of defeat. German fighters officially ordered to run from combat. The strafing campaign devastated Luftwaffe ground operations. P-51 Mustangs, after escorting bombers to target, would descend to strafe German airfields during return flights. Hundreds of aircraft were destroyed on the ground, unable even to take off. One American pilot described, "We'd hit 3 or 4 airfields per mission. The Germans would taxi aircraft into trees trying to hide them. We'd just follow the taxi tracks." By D-Day, the Luftwaffe could muster only 319 sorties over Normandy on June 6, compared to over 14,000 Allied sorties. General Eisenhower's troops landed virtually without air opposition. Eisenhower himself famously stated, "If you see a plane, it will be ours." Air superiority transformed the entire strategic situation. With the P-51 Mustang ensuring bomber survival, American strategic bombing finally achieved its intended devastating purpose, systematically destroying Germany's war economy. The oil campaign perfectly exemplifies this transformation. Before P-51 escort capability, attacking German oil refineries deep inside the Reich was operationally suicidal. Luftwaffe defenders could concentrate overwhelming force against unescorted bombers. After P-51 deployment, these critical targets became completely vulnerable. Beginning May 1944, the 8th Air Force systematically destroyed German oil production infrastructure. The results were absolutely devastating. January 1944, Germany produced 175,000 tons of aviation fuel monthly. June 1944, production collapsed to 50,000 tons, a catastrophic 71% reduction. September 1944, just 7,000 tons remained, a 96% collapse from peak production. This fuel starvation crippled the Luftwaffe more effectively than direct aerial combat. Captured German pilots reported fuel shortages, forcing drastic training reductions. Some fighter units grounded aircraft simply for lack of gasoline. Ace pilots sat idle while precious remaining fuel was desperately hoarded for critical defensive missions. Ball bearing production, the target of those catastrophic Schweinfurt raids, could finally be attacked repeatedly and systematically destroyed. The missions that cost 60 bombers during October 1943 became routine operations by mid-1944. German industry desperately dispersed production facilities, but dispersal itself dramatically reduced efficiency and total output. Ground warfare transformed completely. Allied armies advancing across France after D-Day operated under absolute air superiority. The Luftwaffe, which had dominated ground support missions throughout Poland, France, and Russia, was conspicuously absent. German panzer divisions maneuvered blind, subjected to relentless constant air attack. At Falaise Gap during August 1944, Allied aircraft trapped and systematically destroyed an entire German army. Strategic bombing effectiveness jumped exponentially. During 1943, with bomber loss rates averaging 5 to 10%, the economic calculation favored Germany. Destroying American bombers cost less than replacing bomb factories. By mid-1944, with bomber loss rates under 2%, the strategic equation reversed completely. Germany couldn't possibly replace factories faster than American bombers destroyed them. Intelligence assessments from summer 1944 show Allied planners explicitly recognizing this fundamental shift. One combined Chiefs of Staff assessment stated, "Air superiority has been definitively achieved. Strategic bombing can now proceed without prohibitive losses. German industrial capacity is entering terminal irreversible decline." Even German commanders acknowledged brutal reality. Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments, later testified that P-51 escorted bombing destroyed Germany's ability to wage modern war. Field Marshal Erhard Milch, responsible for aircraft production, told interrogators, "The Mustang ended any realistic hope of recovering air superiority." Military historians consistently rank the P-51 Mustang's introduction as one of the decisive turning points of World War II and air warfare history itself. The United States Air Force's own official historical assessment states, the deployment of long-range fighter escort capable of protecting bombers throughout their entire mission profile fundamentally altered strategic bombing doctrine and permanently resolved the great aerial warfare debate of the early war years. Proved daylight strategic bombing viable. Before P-51 deployment, the viability of daylight precision bombing faced existential doubt. The British Royal Air Force had completely abandoned it after devastating 1940 losses. Many senior American commanders questioned its sustainability. The P-51 Mustang resolved this debate conclusively. Post-war United States strategic bombing surveys explicitly credited precision daylight bombing with shortening the European war by months. Established air superiority doctrine. The P-51 campaign established fundamental principles that dominated post-war air combat doctrine. Control the air first, then conduct ground operations. This became absolutely foundational to American military doctrine. Korea-Vietnam Desert Storm. All major conflicts began with comprehensive air superiority campaigns following the strategic template established during 1944. Demonstrated industrial and technological advantage. American ability to design, produce, and deploy 15,000 P-51 Mustangs within 2 years showcased industrial capacity that no adversary could possibly match. This demonstrated decisively that technological superiority combined with overwhelming production capacity could overcome initial tactical or strategic disadvantages. Created fighter pilot culture. P-51 pilots became emblematic of the American fighter pilot ethos: aggressive, supremely skilled, confident. Legendary aces like Chuck Yeager, who would later break the sound barrier, developed their combat skills flying P-51 Mustangs. The aircraft's exceptional performance allowed skilled pilots to fully exploit their abilities. Military education integration. United States Air Force Academy curriculum includes extensive P-51 case studies under decisive weapons systems coursework. The aircraft exemplifies how a single technological breakthrough can completely reverse strategic situations. Air Force historian Richard Davis wrote, "The P-51 resolved the greatest doctrinal crisis in air warfare history and validated strategic bombing as a war-winning capability." Comparative historical significance. Military historians compare the P-51's strategic impact to other war-changing weapons: the aircraft carrier, radar, proximity fuse. The critical difference? The P-51's impact was immediate, measurable, and absolutely undeniable. Bomber loss rates and Luftwaffe destruction rates tell an unambiguous statistical story. Long-term influence. Post-war fighter development obsessed over the P-51 formula. Long-range, high-performance, multi-role capability. The F-15 Eagle design philosophy directly references P-51 precedent. Establish air superiority first. Everything else follows naturally. International legacy. The P-51 served in over 50 air forces post-war worldwide. Some nations operated them operationally into the 1980s. This extraordinary operational longevity testified to fundamental design excellence. The human element. Behind impressive statistics were men, average age just 23, who climbed into cramped cockpits and flew 1,600-mile missions through flak and fighters. They transformed from terrified rookies to lethal hunters within weeks. Their courage, multiplied by P-51 capability, won the air war. From Black Thursday's 60 lost bombers to total air supremacy in 6 months. This is the documented story of how one aircraft and the courageous men who flew it reversed the air war over Europe and changed military history forever. The numbers tell the undeniable story. October 1943, 20% bomber loss rate, operationally unsustainable. June 1944, less than 2% bomber loss rate, total air dominance. German fighter pilot losses, from 200 monthly to over 400 monthly. Luftwaffe operational strength, from over 800 fighters to a combat ineffective force. This wasn't merely about a superior airplane. The P-51 Mustang represented American industrial might, engineering excellence, and tactical innovation converging at the critical moment. When the Luftwaffe believed they'd won the air war, American factories, engineers, and pilots delivered a devastating response that transformed hunters into hunted across the entire Reich. General Karl Spaatz, commander of United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe, wrote in his final report, "The long-range fighter, particularly the P-51 Mustang, made victory in the air, and thus victory in Europe possible. Without it, the outcome and duration of the war would have been dramatically different." The lesson? Never underestimate American innovation under pressure. When confronted with existential crisis, the combination of industrial capacity, technological ingenuity, and warrior spirit produces solutions that don't merely solve problems, they reverse entire strategic situations. The P-51 Mustang transformed from an overlooked fighter design into the weapon that won the air war. 60 B-17s lost in one day became a distant memory. German fighters that once roamed freely became hunted prey. American bombers flew to any target throughout Europe, systematically striking the Reich's war machine until nothing remained. Want more incredible World War II stories of American innovation and courage? Hit that subscribe button. Next week, how American Navy codebreakers turned Japanese unbreakable codes into an open book, giving Admiral Nimitz the ability to read enemy battle plans before Japanese commanders even receive them. Drop a comment. What other World War II American game changers should we cover? The proximity fuse that made every artillery shell a smart weapon? Liberty ship production that outbuilt German U-boats? Let me know below. Military history proves repeatedly when Americans are told something's impossible, that's when the real work begins. The P-51 Mustang didn't just win the air war. It proved American ingenuity, courage, and determination can overcome any advantage enemies believe they possess. Never underestimate the Americans. The Luftwaffe learned that lesson the hard way. Source collection verification primary sources. Masters of the Air by Donald L. Miller, Chapters 8 to 10 Simon Schuster, 2006, U.S. Army Air Forces Statistical Digest, World War II, Office of Statistical Control, 1945. The Mighty Eighth, A History of the U.S. 8th Air Force by Roger A. Freeman, Doubleday, 1970. USAF Historical Study Number 85. The Development of Air Doctrine in the Army Air Arm, 1917 to 1941. Secondary sources. National Museum of the USAF, Schweinfurt Raids Collection, Imperial War Museum. American Daylight Bombing Campaign records, Air Force Historical Research Agency. Fighter Escort Development, 1942 to 1944. Archive references. National Archives. RG-18 Army Air Forces records. Mission Reports, 1943 to 1944. Maxwell AFB Historical Research Agency. Document 168.7003 to 54.